Good morning. Today's Saturday, April the 14th. My name is Doug Johns. I'm a licensed architect in the state of Tennessee. I'm here reviewing the building on Neelys Bend Road for Louis Johnston. I want to give you a little background. I've been a licensed architect for 30 years. Before that, I worked construction with my father's construction firm as a bricklayer and block layer and cement mason. My 30 years experience as an architect has worked with a big firm in Nashville, traveling all over the country from California to Virginia to Florida, working on major hospital work. Also, I've worked on small renovation and historical renovations, as well as pretty simple small block buildings. I inspected this building in January of 2018. Since then, they've made some improvements on the exterior to deal with the water drainage that was running under the building from Metro stormwater system, which really, in my professional opinion, has caused all of the moisture damage inside this building. That has been taken care of, and the exterior drainage now is being routed around the building so we don't have that water issue anymore. We're looking at the roof structure right now. There's really very little leakage showing through the roof. We found a couple of puddles on the floor. The panels themselves, if you look at the back of them, are still in good shape. They're not showing any rust whatsoever. There's a few places that need to be reattached. The roof structure itself are handmade wood trusses, which for a 1940s building, I think, is pretty typical. They didn't have pre-engineered trusses for the most part back then, probably. And what they have done is taken 2x and scabbed on. Basically, these are 2x6 trusses, which are a lot stronger and bigger members than you would have in today's world. Looking at the bottom chord of these hand-built trusses, we got full 2x6s, which again is pretty unusual for a truss type construction. Today's standards would be typically 2x4 for such a short span. Here we're on the exterior wall on the left side of the building. We've got some hairline cracks that they put some caulk in at some point. We're going to remove that caulking and mortar and re-tuck point. If you look at it from the outside, this wall is within plane. There's no issue with the structural integrity of the wall. The crack runs from the foundation all the way to the sill plate, and it doesn't change in dimension whatsoever. So there's really no settlement that we can tell. This being a barn structure, we typically do some code review early on, depending on what the building use is going to be by the owner. This building could be a doctor's office if we so chose, or if he so chose. He's chosen to make it a barn for use as storage for his supplies for his ministry. The utility occupancy for this particular structure has no real building requirements or building regulations on it other than minimal construction. And it more than meets that requirement.
So just safety standards is what we're looking at, basically?
Yeah. From a safety standpoint, my professional opinion is this building doesn't have any problems other than some routine repairs that we've talked about in earlier reports.
So you don't see this building as being, our barn as being a safety issue at all in the community, a hazard?
No.
In the community?
No, I don't. That's my professional opinion.
And yours, Carl, as well?
Mine as well.
Okay, we're now sort of at the front of the building. On the right-hand side, there are 3 small rooms. One, we think this was probably the office at some point. It does have a concrete slab in it. There's probably more repair work that needs to be done on these 3 rooms than anywhere else. We found one place back there where one of the joist tail rafters has deteriorated and we'd have to replace that. And of course, we'd do that anywhere else we found that condition also. But for the most part, these rooms are in pretty good shape too, as is the rest of the building. But we want to make sure you understand this is not the main building. These are smaller rooms to the side of the building. Saturday, April the 14th, around 11:30 a.m. I'm here with Jonathan Gray. We're going to look at this exterior of this building and interior. As you can see, the front of the building has been boarded up. It's got some wire fencing over the front windows. Obviously, the wood siding has deteriorated a little bit. Some of it's still in decent shape, some of it's not. A few pieces of trim falling. We're going to try to fix all that. Slab is in good shape out front. We're now on the left side elevation of the barn. As you can see, the block wall is pretty well painted. A few hairline cracks a little bit farther down, but there is no visible horizontal offset in the block work. Fascia on this side is in pretty good shape for about 2/3 of the way down the building. The grade for the building slopes away from the building. We're about halfway down the wall. You can see we've got a stair-step hairline crack here that needs to be chiseled out and tuck pointed, which is basically taking masonry mortar and filling that crack back in. There's very little differentiation in the vertical plane, and really the width of the crack from the foundation all the way to the top is almost exactly the same dimension. Back to this small crack that we have on this exterior wall. We've looked at the foundation. Foundation's in good shape. As I was saying before, the crack has not really changed dimension in a vertical plane. This building, in my opinion, will be here for another 50 to 70 years, and this does not affect the structural integrity of the barn whatsoever. We're a little bit farther down the left side wall. We've taken sheet metal to enclose what was once an access space to the crawl space, and we're using that to keep any water infiltration from the ground on this side of the building. This crack sets out a little bit farther, but once again, it's pretty much in plane. There's no bowing in the wall. It shows it continuing all the way up. Same width of the crack. My professional opinion, it does not affect the structural integrity of the barn. We're now a little farther down to another hairline crack, moving from the foundation up to the top plate. It's a minimal offset, minimal crack, approximately 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. There's no differential size indicated between from the foundation all the way up to the top plate. We'll do the same on it. Rip it out, tuck point it, putting mortar back in. It does not affect the structural integrity of the barn. What I'm trying to say when I say rip it out is we're going to chisel it out, remove the caulking that's there and some of the mortar, and tuck point it back in with mortar to seal that crack. We're now at the rear of the building. We're looking at a trench drain, or some people call them French drains. It has a silk fabric around it to keep small dirt particles from getting inside. It's run across the back of the building to relieve any water coming around the back corner of the building and releasing it out into natural flow. This trench drain was put in to relieve the groundwater that was flowing underneath the existing barn, but now has been rerouted around so that we have alleviated what was a water problem in the crawl space of the barn area. This work, from my professional opinion, was done in a workmanlike manner. It has gravel on top of it to allow any water that might get in to filtrate down into the drain pipe and exit it. We're here at the left rear corner. We've got pretty good deterioration in the wood siding at this point. That needs to be repaired. We're going to remove the weatherhead, all the electrical boxes, and meter base, because electricity is not required for utility or barn use. Okay, we're now on the right side of the building looking down the long elevation. If you'll notice, there is no curvature or bowing out of the existing masonry wall, which means there is no structural problem or structural settlement with the barn. We're now going to look at the roof of the barn. That's typical barn construction of V-rib metal panels. We've got a few areas where obviously wind may have gotten up under it a little bit and the panel has pulled up. That's an easy fix with screws and washers. As you move down through here, there's a few other places where we can attach or maybe have to patch a little bit, but basically it doesn't affect the structural integrity of the building, and it is in pretty good shape for the age that it is. It is in no way a hazard or safety hazard to the community. We've had over a half-inch of rain already this morning, and basically we found 2 drip points, little water on the floor. We're at the front of the barn right here looking at the existing dirt floor. The goal is, I think, we're going to remove all of this floor structure and come back in from the front doors and infill with dirt throughout for the rest of the barn.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Gray. I'm an evangelist with Layman Lessons Ministries. It is April 14th on a Saturday, and we're standing in the dry, and it's raining pretty hard outside right now. I grew up doing all types of construction experience. My father is a licensed plumbing contractor in the state of North Carolina, and just retired from Metro schools here in Nashville after 13 years of being a maintenance or a plumbing supervisor. I worked 6 years with Dillon Mechanical doing HVAC installation, and led a crew with Piedmont Natural Gas for 6 years. I currently work for Freeman Webb Properties, where I am a maintenance specialist and a rehab manager. I oversee all the rehab that's going on at our property, and I will be leading all the volunteers in the rehab construction efforts here at this property. During my course of working in construction over the past 15 to 20 years, I've had an extensive experience with working with codes and building inspectors while working at Freeman Webb. We have been to, Freeman Webb is one of the largest property management companies here in Nashville. We work with building contractors and Metro codes on a daily basis, and to stay compliant with all the building requirements here in Davidson County. And since over the past 15 to 20 years of maintenance work, I have acquired multiple certifications, my EPA certifications, and many other classes through Freeman Webb, the GNAA, and Grace Hill and other learning institutes to certified to perform maintenance and contracting requirements. I'm actually standing on a block wall that extends the entire length or width of the building. There's one on both sides, and what you see down here is marine grade plywood that has been enforced to seal the crawl space to reroute the groundwater around the building to the French drain that we saw earlier.
I'm Carl Kassler, 1443 Neelys Bend, 2 houses down from the proposed barn for the Layman Church. Used to be a restaurant, grocery, country market. Come in and get bologna sandwiches, deli sandwiches. Been resident on the Bend for pretty much all my life since I was 13 years old, so 62 now. Not to get age involved, but it's a good structurally sound building. No bows in the wall. And I am a licensed general contractor since 2005, April of 2005, and built multiple homes. Been in the construction business for over 35 years. Know a little bit about what I'm talking about. There is some loose boards here on the front, but that's typical in a barn. There's no codes that reflect on loose or rotten wood in a barn. Of course, the church would want to attend to that and bring it up to speed and make it look positive for the public, but it is a barn, so caulking for the higher boards, replacing the lower boards, and nothing expensive. Cracks, which honest are not an issue. A 75-year-old building, and at one point it was added onto, and I believe it was right along in this section here that this whole portion down there is new. Up under the crawl space here, it's a concrete foundation. Not just a block laying on dirt. It's been here for over 75 years, and it's a good, strong barn for storing goods. Back side of the building, the water was rerouted with a French drain to come around the back side of the building. Backside, there's only one spot that's got some cracks right by a boarded up window for safety purposes, keep intruders out. Other than that, the back's in good shape. Old barn, it's in good shape, and in my opinion, will last another 50, 75 years. It's a typical view of the roof. It's all fairly sound. There's some pieces that probably could be tacked down a little better, but being a barn, there's a lot of barns in this area with metal that's loose. It's holds water, doesn't leak all that much. It's in relatively real good shape. Final summary of the project, I think you'll remove all the floor and pack it with dirt. This barn structure ought to last another 50, 75 years without an issue. And it's good, strong structure. This being a community store at one point in time, and structurally it's in the same shape it is now as it was back then. It being a barn converted into a barn, it should be in good structural shape and last another good 50 years. And it'll help the community and the church.
I'm Joe Willis. I'm a native to Madison. Was born in Madison, have lived my entire life here. I've been a property owner in the Neelys Bend community, which is near the end of Neelys Bend Road, for about 30 years now. I have been here, have lived here, I work here, I farm full-time, and I have raised my family here. And due to the fact of Neelys Bend being a dead end, if I go anywhere, I have to pass the subject property that Mr. Johnston owns now. So it's impossible to pass it without seeing it. It's on the side of the road, just like you see your neighbors' homes. And I have watched this property over the years and always had hopes that there would be some usage that would be strong and good for the community to add back, which is what we have here an opportunity for. With that being said, the building has not had a great deal of maintenance done, but it is a solid building. I have looked at the roof. I have barns that are part of my farm operation. I have several barns, in fact. And from time to time, metal roofs like this have to be repaired. We have had storms come through the area over the years, and panels have been damaged or bent. Very few have been removed. But to my knowledge, in 30 years of being a property owner here, I have never seen the building without a roof on it. There have been times that panels have been bent or moved over, and then it required someone to actually go up and reattach those panels. That's part of the beauty of a metal roof like this, is you can straighten it out a lot of times and reattach and get a good water seal that will keep the water from coming into the structure. And that's what this roof is. There are people that work on barns, whether it be the roofs or painting the barns on a regular basis. It's what they do for a living. What I have seen them do to my barns is actually go up and they use proper nails and screws that are designed to attach metal roofing, and they actually crawl across the roof, and anything that's loose they retighten. And then if there are holes or pinholes or areas that might leak, they use a lot of times silicone, tube silicone that's relatively inexpensive. And from what I've seen on my own barns, I can't imagine that two men couldn't do this work in well less than a day, probably half a day, because this is what they do all the time, and they move rapidly, and they can repair it. I have looked at the roof. There is rust, but it is surface rust. It is not penetrating rust that goes all the way through the panels. It appears just to be on the surface. And with that, in time, if someone chooses to, they could actually seal that and paint that, and it would create a better appearance, but it's not necessary to keep the water out. So I believe that this can be repaired relatively inexpensive, and I'm not a roof contractor by any means, but from what I've had to pay in the past, I can't imagine it being over, maybe $300 or so to do this kind of repair, because it's not a super steep roof, so therefore they can move rapidly while they're working. But that's, I'd like to see the building stay. I don't see a problem with the building, and the building appears to be sound. There's some things that need to be worked on, but a lot of those are not structural from my perspective. They appear to be just things that need to be repaired to make it a better building, and they will be additions as opposed to necessary requirements. With that being said too, at no time have I seen the building be a hazard to the community. Mr. Johnston has only owned the building for a short time, maybe a few months, and myself and many of the neighbors would like to see this structure stay. To my knowledge, there's not a standing code here in Metro Nashville that works with barn structures or barn storage type structures. With that, they are not typically public buildings that have access that way, and as far as I'm concerned, the barns that I have worked on, and I have had neighbors to build barns, and they do not require building permits for those barn type structures. This building has been closed and boarded up since the tenure that I have owned property in Neelys Bend, which is there 30 years. And with that, it has been used as storage. Previous owners had materials stored in, some from the old store that I can remember as a child going to with my father. And so there have been some supplies in there, other things that previous owners have actually stored there. And that's what the continued use of this property will be, just as storage, but it'll be storage for an organization that's trying to help the people in the community.